Aloha fam fam, it's Unity Grace here, and I am live in the teleportation pad in Vancouver and doing a quick little live stream. I've just completed an amazing week in Cancun with the Dr. Joe fam fam and taking the quantum leap. So a lot of things are going like super interdimensional now, as you can see by the backdrop. And so I was a little bit sleepy because I just got out of the teleportation pad, and I just want to share a couple things with you I was a little bit sleepy, so I didn't tag as many people as usual. So let's share if it's inspiring to you, and sharing some ideas of expanding our interdimensionality and how to go about doing that. So as you can see, the backdrop is quite interdimensional, and there's all this wildlife here. So the point of my quick little live stream right now is just to say that all the gates within our DNA are starting to open up. The Earth is activating this beautiful Earthship Merkaba that we are on, and these beautiful Earthship Merkabas called our bodies. And the invitation today in this video is to really start to play with our languaging and with each other and have fun with how we language things. So of course at these Dr. Joe events we make like the most amazing connections with spirit family, so we've had this really incredible week together. I wish those crows and seagulls would just be a little bit more quiet. Oh yeah, there's canoes, there's giant totems, eagles' nests, etc. Okay, yeah, so we made all these amazing connections and friendships and so on this week, and one of my invitations to our group was to replace the word airport with teleportation launchpad. And what I learned from traveling around the world for the last 8 years was that I decided at one point when I got on a plane and I was doing some grid work, I was flying from LA to Israel, and I made a choice. And I said, the moment the wheels take off from this runway is going to feel like the exact same moment when the wheels land on the runway in Israel. And it happened. And my consciousness made this really profound leap in that moment. And one of my dear soul fathers, Ralph Ring, had told me that the same thing. He's a great teacher in consciousness, and he had shared with me that the same thing had happened with him many years ago. And so when we just start making the choice, the powerful choice of how we want our reality to exist, a really important part of how we influence that reality is the words that we choose to use, the language that we choose to use. And as most people are probably super aware, English is a dualistic language, which is why the original root races of the earth were subjected to systematic destruction, including the taking away of people's children and putting them in residential schools to beat the languages out of them, because First Nations people spoke primary language, which is not coded to time. And if you examine the English language, you will discover that it's dualistic and it's very coded to time. And see, the thing about time is not real and it doesn't exist. And the final leap for the consciousness into the present moment of now, where the fun really begins, is when it transcends linear time. So this was this really cool interdimensional spot to stop and have this conversation and invite play with ourselves, play with each other, with the kinds of languaging that we're using. So yes, I invited all of our beautiful pod in Cancun when we were leaving. I said, what if we played with saying an airport is no longer called an airport, it's called the teleportation pad. And that when we go to scan our ticket, when we're showing our passport and we go to scan our ticket on those little scanners, just before we get on the plane, Wouldn't it be fun if, even though we're not together, all at separate times, scanning our ticket, and at the same time scan it with your left hand, and with your right hand tap your shoulder at the same time and say, "Beam me up, Scotty." Because not only is it fun, but when several of us start playing these little games with reality consecutively, whenever we are doing the same thing, regardless of whether we're together or not, we actually start to transform the reality through our collective agreement and our word, because that's how collective reality is made, through collective agreement. So that's really the point of this quick little live stream, because it's super fun, and I've got this halo. Oh my God, I'm an angel. And it also looks like a Zolkeen calendar, and of course it's beautiful native. It's not art. They called it native art, but it wasn't art. It was a whole lot more than just art. Anyways, so let's begin to play with our languaging, if we're not already. Let's begin to practice talking in the present moment. The thing you discover about English, if you try to practice talking in the present moment, you'll discover that pretty much all of the English language is coded to time. Even the word "and" is a connecting word. You really start to see that everything in English is connects. And when there's connection, it means that there's separation. Whereas, you know, as kids, we saw these cartoons of primitive man speaking in the present moment, and we were taught to think that that was primitive, but it turns out those primitive men and primitive people were actually speaking quantum physics language. So let's play with the language. Let's have some fun. Let's see some suggestions. If anyone wants to write suggestions here of things they like to play with to transform the reality in our collective agreement now. And let's bring in those unicorns and dolphins, because let's remember what unicorns are teaching us. That little horn coming right out of their bindi. Our thought is creating our reality. Let's be mindful of that. And yeah, I'm going to talk about mind movies and stuff like that later. Other really great tools for programming our consciousness. But in the meantime, I'm going to step onto the next teleportation pad from Vancouver to Victoria, British Columbia, to claim victory for all life on this full moon, of the dissolving of the veils and the opening of the gateways home to interdimensionality for all life. Yay, we did it. If this little share is helpful, then please share. Please share in your networks. I love you. And I'll just mention one other thing. This entire reality is symbolic. Everything about us is a symbol. And the symbol imprints upon the reality conditions. And so, depending on how that symbol is created is the conditions that it imprints upon the reality. And then depending on how much attention that symbol gets is how powerful the intention behind that symbol becomes. Which is why many symbols were conscripted by the powerful powers that were, that no longer are. So fun. But just, you know, this is such a great example. I'm in this thing that used to be called an airport, and it's just filled with symbols. And all these little birds, it sounds like seagulls are here, but in our consciousness we think, oh, it's just a recording of a seagull, because that's what our mind says. And if we were outside and we heard this noise, and we go, oh, it's a real seagull. Once again, I'm just mentioning this to make the point of how symbolic the reality is and how we can create it and construct it in every moment. And we are at a place now where it doesn't have to be so much collective agreement, because we're becoming sovereign beings, and our energy fields are neutralizing. The polarities are neutralizing. That's what the pole shift is really about on planet Earth. It's about the polarities of our energy fields neutralizing, as the positive and negative charge of our energy field polarizes as our masculine and feminine unify in the singularity of heart, twin flame physics. that thing I walk the earth for, praying with those little grids and ley lines to restore the balance. As those energies unify in the heart, then our energy field neutralizes, and that's what sovereign is. Once the energy field is sovereign, then we're really all living inside of our own little sovereign bubbles, creating our realities, and our thoughts are reflecting off the edge of our beautiful little sovereign bubbles, and we're driving our little light ships around. I call this Flight Lessons 101 and getting ourselves back into the center of our mothership. We stepped into these beautiful motherships, and somewhere we left the owner's manuals behind. So these little transmissions are about getting that owner's manual back into our conscious awareness so we can play and have fun. Okay. I love you all, and yes, onward. Ahui ho.